Dune comes to us from director Denis Villeneuve, best known for films like Sicario and Blade Runner 2049, and is of course based upon the classic 1965 science fiction novel by Frank Herbert, which I'm sure many of you read in high school like I did, or perhaps you may have seen the David Lynch film first. Dune is at its core the story of Paul Atreides, a young man who travels to the desert planet of Arrakis, with his noble family to control the harvest of the spice, the most valuable substance in the universe that is only found on Arrakis, a commodity that other noble houses wish to control in their own quest for power, and will use any means necessary to gain that power. For people that have read Dune, this is their Lord of the Rings, an epic saga with warring families and a vast wealth of lore to dive into, that spans millennia. As with Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, Dune is a seminal science fiction work that has inspired countless other stories, with the most famous of course being George Lucas's Star Wars. A fun game that you can play while watching Dune is keeping an eye out for things that Star Wars very generously borrowed from Frank Herbert's book. Denis Villeneuve has made the wise decision in splitting the Dune novel into two films, allowing for an adaptation that remains incredibly faithful to Frank Herbert's writing, while also effectively translating the book into cinematic form, so that new audiences aren't overwhelmed by all the different names and terms common within the Dune universe. With this film really being titled Dune Part 1, this is where most of the world building for the Dune universe takes place, as fans of the book know how dense it can be, and that there's a fair amount of exposition in the early chapters of Dune, where you're constantly running to the back of the book trying to figure out what certain terms and phrases mean, not too unlike reading Lord of the Rings for the first time. So I really have to commend how seamlessly Denis Villeneuve has reworked the novel into something more easily digestible, while at the same time still feeling like you are experiencing Dune, just as Frank Herbert had envisioned. Purely as an adaptation, Dune is an astonishing achievement, translating Frank Herbert's words as best as anyone's ever done, and it goes to show that for some of these book adaptations to work, you really need a director who lives and breathes the source material. David Lynch was not all that familiar with Dune or science fiction for that matter, before making his Dune film in the 80s. With Denis, there's clearly a reverence for the source material. You definitely don't have to worry about people reading lengthy monologues to the camera in this version. Instead, Denis Villeneuve dedicates a lot of time letting this universe and its characters breathe and evolve over the course of the film, and I'm sure that some critics would say too much time. However, in a time where blockbuster films are constantly being edited quicker to hold viewer attention and maximize how many showings in a day that a film can have, I am so happy that a film like Dune can just take the time needed to properly tell its story, especially one that is filled with political paranoia and tension while warring families conspire against each other. At the heart of the film, we have the dynamic between Paul Atreides and his parents, Duke Leto and Lady Jessica, all played wonderfully by Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, and Rebecca Ferguson respectively. Throughout Dune, Paul is constantly being thrust into new experiences that he simply isn't prepared for, and held against lofty expectations that keep him second-guessing his abilities and his identity as an eventual leader of the Atreides house. And it really is a testament to Timothée Chalamet doing a fantastic job of conveying that self-doubt in Paul. That just makes him feel believable and human in this big sci-fi universe. Denis Villeneuve has been called a rather cold filmmaker with regards to his characters in his more recent films, but I tend to disagree with that notion, as I find them to have more heart and humanity than some people give these films credit for. I honestly think one of the best examples is the conversation with Duke Leto comforting Paul early in the film, where Oscar Isaac beautifully says, "A great man doesn't seek to lead, he's called to it. And if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be, my son." It is this kind of dialogue that keeps a clear empathetic link to these characters, all linked to concepts such as fate and destiny. And while Paul's character is building on monomyth archetypes that have existed for centuries, it's how Frank Herbert deconstructs those archetypes later in Paul's character arc that has me excited for Dune Part 2, and hopefully an adaptation of Dune Messiah. The cast across the board is an absolute treat, wonderfully adapting some characters for a modern flair, where the original novel could be a little male heavy, evolving the cast in a way that Frank Herbert would be proud of, like the casting of Sharon Duncan-Brewster as Dr. Liette Keynes, Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck, and even Zendaya as Chang, who we understandably don't get a whole lot of in Part 1. Jason Momoa really surprised me as Duncan Idaho, just having this infectious big brother energy to his performance. That all fits with Momoa's surfer bro persona in real life, and it all really allows the bond between Duncan Idaho and Paul Atreides to feel quite genuine and moving in a sense that was just absent from previous adaptations of Dune. Charlotte Rampling is terrifying as the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit, where Villeneuve does a phenomenal job with the art and production design teams in making the Bene Gesserit sisterhood feel really oppressive, mysterious, and controlling, who essentially act as these puppet masters behind a lot of the inner workings of the Dune universe. Denis is incredible at creating mystery and atmosphere in his films, by not only drawing you into the experience with a powerful soundtrack, which Hans Zimmer has gone above and beyond in delivering this time around, but also in how he constructs his shots using moodier lighting and colours with Greg Fraser's cinematography, to really sell how terrifying characters like the Bene Gesserit would seem to Paul. The suppressive approach to the characters is amplified when introduced to House Harkonnen, the rival noble family to House Atreides in the Dune universe. Every trip to the Harkonnen homeworld feels dark and utterly disturbing, carrying the spirit of H.R. Giger's artwork from earlier iterations of Dune's theatrical development in the 1970s. Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen actually feels like an otherworldly threat, compared to the raging balloon man from the David Lynch film. While we don't get as much time with certain Harkonnens as I would have liked, such as Dave Bautista's Glossu Raban and David Dastmalchian as Peter de Vries, the introduction to them and their threat in part 1 has made me really excited for how they'll be handled in part 2. And then of course comes the main reason a lot of people are seeing Dune in the first place, the spectacle of it all. No matter if you saw this on an IMAX screen or on HBO Max on your TV, the sheer size and scale of the film is just astonishing. Every visual effect shot in this movie is approached with realism and believability, perfectly integrated with what practical elements actually exist in these shots. From all the spaceships to the legendary sandworms of Arrakis, so many shots are approached with a sense of grandeur that you don't really get to see in big budget films these days. The first sequences with the sandworms is honestly quite jaw-dropping. From the first ripples in the sand teasing their approach, to the large mouth slowly becoming visible in the sand as they engulf what's above them, it is a sight like nothing you'll see on a screen this year. Every aspect of Denis Villeneuve's film is about effortlessly transporting you into the world of Dune and its mythology. Of course, this is ultimately part 1 in a larger story, and while it is satisfying to know part 2 is on the way, it will be a struggle until then to be watching the numerous dream sequences in the film and that Fellowship of the Ring style cliffhanger ending, just teasing what's to come in the future, even if it's all part of a story that book readers are very familiar with. If wanting more Dune is the main thing that I'm taking away from all of this, then I think Denis Villeneuve, Legendary and Warner Brothers have all succeeded in bringing this once unfilmable saga to the big screen in such an incredible way. Dune gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you like this review. If you want to see more reviews just like this one, stay right here for your Mono Fix. Bye guys.